Welcome to a deep dive
Oh,
into the philosophical Renaissance.
okay.
So we're going to be looking at how, thinkers wrestled with age-old questions about knowledge, power, the nature of reality,
Yeah.
and in the process sort of set the stage for the modern world.
Mm.
Our guide for this journey
Yeah, yeah.
is the chapter, The Philosophical Renaissance, from the book The Beginning of Modern Philosophy.
Right.
So yeah, get ready for some surprising twists about famous thinkers and maybe even some aha moments about ideas you thought you knew.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so the book starts by talking about this period of philosophical stagnation
Right.
that happened after the schools of Athens were closed by Justinian, I think it was.
Mhm.
And so there were no significant advancements in philosophy for about 1,000 years.
Wow.
And it's easy to just point the finger at the church and say, oh, they're responsible.
Right.
But I wonder if it's really that simple.
Yeah, it's definitely more complex than that. I mean, you see,
Yeah.
these seeds of intolerance were sown much earlier, even back in ancient Greece.
Interesting.
Plato, for instance,
Yeah.
linked morality to right belief.
So, like, if you have the wrong beliefs,
Exactly.
you're immoral.
Imagine the implications of that.
Yeah, that's wild.
The idea that holding the wrong beliefs was somehow immoral.
Right.
This concept had a ripple effect throughout history and kind of set the stage for the persecution of those who dared to think differently.
Wow. So it's not so much about blaming the church as it is like a philosophical domino effect that started way before.
Exactly. I mean, the church certainly played a role,
Yeah.
but the roots of intellectual suppression really run much deeper. And that's something to keep in mind as we kind of explore this period.
So speaking of complexity, let's talk about Aristotle.
Okay.
Now, I always thought of him as a cornerstone of like Western thought.
Yeah.
But the book mentions how his philosophy actually entered Europe through Muslim Spain.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it is.
So these ancient Greek ideas being
Right.
preserved and transmitted by Islamic scholars
Wow.
only to kind of reemerge in Europe centuries later.
Yeah, and despite initial resistance, St. Thomas Aquinas eventually reconciled Aristotle's teachings with Catholic theology.
He did. He was very influential in getting them widely accepted within the church.
But wait, so Aquinas reconciles Aristotle with church teachings,
Yeah.
and then Aristotle falls out of favor.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, remember how we were talking about circumstances always changing?
Right.
So the fall of Constantinople led to an influx of Greek manuscripts into Italy,
Okay.
and that rekindled interest in Plato.
Oh, so it kind of pushed Aristotle out?
Ironically, yeah, it contributed to Aristotle's decline. It's a reminder that even the most influential figures can
Yeah.
be kind of eclipsed
Yeah.
by these shifting intellectual tides.
Okay, so we have Plato back in vogue, Aristotle fading,
Hmm.
and then boom, the Copernican revolution.
Yes,
Um,
a major turning point.
I mean, we all know the basics. The Earth revolves around the sun.
Right.
But it's fascinating how this wasn't just like a scientific shift, it was a philosophical earthquake.
Totally. The Copernican theory wasn't just about rearranging the celestial furniture.
Right.
It completely upended, like, the traditional hierarchy of the universe.
Yeah.
It challenged Aristotle's ideas about the Earth's position,
Okay.
the division between, like, the earthly and the heavenly realms.
Right.
And this had profound implications for how people viewed humanity's place in the cosmos.
Yeah. And this is where Giordano Bruno enters the picture.
Oh, absolutely.
He really grasped the philosophical implications of all this, didn't he?
Bruno was a true visionary. He was willing to follow Copernicus's ideas to their logical
Like all the way?
and potentially dangerous conclusions.
Yeah.
He embraced the concept of an infinite universe,
Okay.
teeming with multiple inhabited worlds,
Wow.
which was a very, very dangerous concept at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a time when challenging the church could cost you your life.
And it tragically did,
It did.
in his case. His story, from his struggles with the church to his travels and his eventual execution,
Right.
it's almost Shakespearean in its drama.
It really is.
Yeah.
But even in the face of persecution,
Yeah.
Bruno championed this view of the universe
Okay.
filled with an active spiritual matter,
Hmm.
which is a stark contrast to Aristotle's passive matter
Yeah.
and an idea that would go on to influence later thinkers.
Okay, so now let's talk about a figure who's maybe not quite the hero Bruno was. Francis Bacon.
Okay.
Brilliant mind, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But as the book mentions, his ambition for power and his involvement in some scandals makes him a little bit more complicated.
It's true that Bacon's personal life was marked by controversy,
Yeah.
but his ideas were equally groundbreaking.
Okay.
He championed the practical application of knowledge, believing that science should be used to improve the human condition. Imagine a world where science is used to create new materials,
Like synthetic materials.
even new forms of life.
Oh,
It
wow.
was a bold vision, almost like something out of science fiction, wouldn't you say?
It's like he foresaw a future where we could manipulate like the very fabric of existence. But here's the kicker. The book highlights how Bacon actually rejected the Copernican theory.
Hmm, that is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating paradox.
It seems like a huge contradiction for someone so focused on observation and experimentation.
It does. His rejection of the Copernican theory shows how even brilliant minds can cling to outdated models.
Even when the evidence points in a different direction.
Exactly.
And while he championed this inductive method, it ultimately failed because it relied on these forms.
Right, these
Which, as science has shown, don't exist as he imagined.
His vision didn't quite align with the reality of scientific advancements at the time.
So, like, figures like Kepler and Gilbert were making these groundbreaking discoveries in astronomy and magnetism,
Yes.
but they were driven by pure intellectual curiosity.
Not necessarily practical utility.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound breakthroughs come from just asking why, rather than how can we use this?
It's like following your curiosity
Absolutely.
wherever it leads,
Exactly.
rather than just trying to find something usul.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time to talk about one of the biggest names in philosophy,
All right, let's do it.
René Descartes.
Sounds good.
It's amazing how much these early modern thinkers were like wrestling with these fundamental questions.
Yeah.
The nature of reality, the limits of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It really makes you think.
It does, doesn't it? And you have to remember, they were operating in a time of just immense change, like the Renaissance, the Reformation, the scientific revolution.
Right.
All these forces were colliding, creating both opportunity and uncertainty.
Yeah, it was like a perfect breeding ground for new ideas.
It was.
Speaking of new ideas, there's one figure from this era that we definitely can't leave out, René Descartes.
Oh, of course, Descartes.
Often called the father of modern philosophy. And from what I've read, his work was like a major departure from the medieval worldview.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was a pivotal figure.
Yeah.
His work laid the groundwork for the Enlightenment
Okay.
and the way we approach knowledge even today.
The book portrays him as this Frenchman who really valued solitude and truth,
Right?
not necessarily for practical use like Bacon,
Mm-hmm.
but for its own inherent value.
Yeah, almost like a philosophical hermit,
Yeah.
seeking knowledge for knowledge's sake.
Exactly.
He spent years living in Holland, actually,
Oh, really?
moving from place to place, trying to avoid distractions and really delve into his studies.
Wow, that's dedication.
It is.
So if he was so focused on reason,
Yeah.
did he have like a specific method
He did.
for finding the truth?
Yeah, he outlined his famous method
Huh?
in his Discourse on Method,
Okay.
and it's based on 4 main rules.
4 rules. All right, I'm intrigued.
Okay, well,
Lay 'em on me.
the first rule is to accept nothing is true unless it's self-evident.
Oh, so don't just blindly accept things because someone in authority said so.
Exactly. Question everything.
Don't take anything for granted.
The second rule is to break down complex problems into smaller, more manageable parts.
Okay.
Think of it like a puzzle.
Yeah.
You can't solve the whole thing at once. You got to start with individual pieces.
Right. Divide and conquer.
Exactly.
Okay. What about rule number 3?
Rule number 3 is to start with the simplest ideas
Okay.
and build up to the more complex ones.
So you're laying a foundation,
Exactly. Brick by brick.
making sure that each step is solid.
Yes. Ensuring each step is solid before you move on to the next.
All right. So it's all about building a really solid foundation for knowledge.
It is.
Seems pretty logical so far.
What about the final rule?
Yeah. What's the final rule?
Be thorough and systematic in your analysis,
Okay.
making sure that you don't overlook any important details.
So no jumping to conclusions.
Exactly.
It sounds like a pretty solid method for like getting to the truth.
It's designed to be.
It's interesting how this like methodical approach contrasts with, say, Bruno's more intuitive, like leaps of faith.
Yeah, it does reflect a key difference in their philosophical approaches.
Yeah.
Descartes was all about establishing a firm foundation for knowledge, while Bruno was more willing to embrace uncertainty
Right.
and explore uncharted territories.
I mean, both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses, I guess.
Oh, for sure.
Now, the book mentions this idea of universal doubt.
Oh, yes.
Didn't Descartes want to question everything,
He did?
even the reality of the external world?
Yeah, I mean, that's some serious skepticism right there.
It is.
Descartes believed that to arrive at true knowledge,
Yeah.
you You have to start by doubting everything you think you know.
Oh, wow.
By systematically questioning your beliefs, you can identify those that are truly indubitable, the
Indubitable.
beliefs that cannot be doubted.
Okay, so, like, what did he find was actually undoubtable?
Oh, his own existence.
His owning.
His famous phrase, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, perfectly captures this core insight.
So even if he doubted everything else, he realized he couldn't doubt the fact that he was doubting.
Exactly.
The very act of doubting proved that he existed.
As a thinking being.
Wow, that really is mind-bending when you stop and consider it.
It is.
So by starting with doubt, he arrives at the certainty of his own existence.
It's like pulling yourself up by your own mental bootstraps.
Exactly.
And this idea had huge implications for the study of consciousness and self-awareness.
Okay.
It really shifted the focus inward to the nature of the mind itself.
Okay.
It paved the way for centuries of debate about what it means to be a conscious being.
And this is where Descartes' idea of mind-body dualism comes in, right?
Precisely.
This notion that the mind and body are separate entities.
Based on his cogito argument, Descartes concluded that the mind and body were distinct substances.
Okay.
He argued that the mind is immaterial and non-extended,
Yeah.
while the body is material and exists in space,
So we are essentially a thinking mind.
inhabiting a physical body.
Right, inhabiting a physical body.
And this idea has had a profound impact on Western thought.
Yeah, it's like so ingrained in our thinking.
It is.
But how did Descartes even know that the external world, the world of material things, was real?
That's a great question.
Like, if he's starting with this universal doubt,
Right?
how do we know our senses are giving us an accurate picture of reality?
Well, for Descartes, the existence of God was a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Oh.
He offered several arguments for the existence of God.
Like his famous ontological argument?
Yes, his famous ontological argument.
Now I could use a refresher on how that works.
Okay, so essentially it argues that the very concept of God as a perfect being
Mm-hmm.
necessarily implies his existence.
Okay.
Because existence is a perfection,
Right?
and a perfect being must possess all perfections.
Yeah.
Then God must exist.
So God exists because the very idea of God requires existence.
That's the essence of it.
okay.
It's a very bold
Yeah,
argument.
it is.
It was a cornerstone of Descartes' thinking.
But how does this all tie back to like the external world and our senses?
Well, Descartes argued that because God is perfect, he wouldn't deceive us about the reality of the external world.
Oh, so like a good God.
Yes, a good God wouldn't create us with senses that systematically mislead us about the nature of reality.
Right.
So because God exists and God is good, we can trust that what our senses tell us is generally reliable.
So it's like God is vouching for the accuracy of our senses.
Exactly.
That's how Descartes kind of bridges the gap between his initial skepticism and his belief in a material world.
It might seem like a bit of a leap of faith,
Yeah.
but for Descartes, it was a logical conclusion based on his understanding of God's nature.
And this idea that God guarantees the reliability of our senses, that's how he can move forward.
Yes, it allowed him to move forward with his scientific investigations.
It's fascinating how he tried to reconcile like his philosophical ideas with his scientific work.
He was a mathematician as well as a philosopher,
Right, right.
and his work in mathematics, particularly his development of analytic geometry,
Yeah.
was a major contribution to the scientific revolution.
He saw the universe as like a vast machine,
He did.
governed by mathematical laws.
And he believed that by understanding those laws,
Yeah.
we could unlock the secrets of nature.
So we have Descartes the skeptic who doubts everything,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have Descartes the scientist
Right.
who seeks to understand the world through reason and observation.
He embodies the tension between doubt and certainty that really defined this era.
Yeah, and the book mentions that Descartes didn't really contribute much to ethics.
That's true. His primary focus was on epistemology and metaphysics.
So the nature of knowledge and reality.
Yeah, he didn't develop a systematized ethical theory.
But even though he wasn't directly focused on ethics,
Right.
it seems like his ideas about the mind-body relationship had some pretty major implications for ethical thinking.
They did, because if the mind is separate from the body,
Like he believed.
as Descartes believed, then it raises questions about free will and moral responsibility.
Right, because if our actions are just the result of physical processes,
In our bodies.
are we really in control?
And if we're not in control, can we truly be held accountable for our actions?
It creates a whole new set of challenges for thinking about morality.
Exactly. It's like he opened up this Pandora's box of ethical questions.
So as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive into Descartes, What are like the key takeaways?
Well, first and foremost, Descartes' emphasis on reason and doubt
Right.
was groundbreaking. It challenged the authority of tradition and dogma,
Okay.
and it really paved the way for the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
He encouraged people to think for themselves, to question assumptions, to demand evidence.
Yeah, and then there's that mind-body dualism, which
Right.
has had such a huge impact on how we think about consciousness, the self, and even the relationship between mind and body.
In medicine and psychology, even,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
And even though he didn't focus much on ethics directly, his work raised all these crucial ethical questions about free will and moral responsibility.
Which philosophers are still grappling with today.
It's crazy how much ground we've already covered in this deep dive,
I know.
and we're not even done yet.
There's still more to explore. We've just scratched the surface
Mhm.
of this incredible period.
Right.
And the next chapter promises to be just as fascinating.
I can't wait. We've been on quite a journey
We have.
exploring this philosophical renaissance
Yeah.
and how these groundbreaking ideas weren't just theoretical.
Right.
They had real-world consequences.
It's true. These ideas challenged traditional hierarchies,
Yeah.
questioned long-held authorities,
Mm.
and they ultimately laid the groundwork for the modern world.
Yeah, they weren't just philosophers in ivory towers.
No.
They were engaged in a struggle that really shaped
Yeah.
how we see ourselves and the world around us.
And continues to shape us, I think.
Even today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. It's
Mhm.
not just history.
It's about understanding the roots of our present.
Exactly.
It's all connected.
So as we wrap things up,
Okay?
what are some of the lasting impacts
That's a great question.
of this philosophical renaissance?
Yeah.
How do these ideas still resonate with us in the 21st century?
Well, I think there are several key ways
Okay.
this era continues to shape our thinking.
Right.
First, that emphasis on reason and individual inquiry that we see in figures like Descartes
Right.
that laid the groundwork for the Enlightenment
Mm-hmm.
and the modern scientific method.
Okay.
We still value critical thinking,
Yeah.
questioning authority,
Right.
seeking evidence-based explanation.
It's about not taking things for granted,
Right, exactly.
demanding proof.
Yes, don't just take my word for it. Go see for yourself.
Right. It's about empowering individuals to
Exactly.
seek knowledge and challenge the status quo.
I love that.
And that's incredibly powerful.
It is.
Second, the idea of the social contract, which we explored with Hobbes, that continues to be,
Such a central concept.
yeah, like a central concept in political philosophy.
Absolutely.
We're still debating the role of government, individual rights,
Yeah.
the balance of power
Yes, that delicate balance.
between the state and its citizens.
It seems like every election cycle, we're renegotiating that social contract.
Yeah, what are we willing to give up
Right.
for security?
Exactly.
What do we expect from our leaders?
These are questions that Hobbes was wrestling with centuries ago.
And finally,
Yeah.
this philosophical renaissance grappled with these fundamental questions
Mhm.
about reality,
Right.
knowledge,
Yes.
consciousness,
Big questions.
questions that still fascinate and challenge us today.
They do, don't they?
From Descartes' mind-body dualism
Mm-hmm.
to Bruno's concept of an infinite universe.
These thinkers really pushed the boundaries of human thought.
Yeah, they forced us to confront the big questions about who we are,
Yeah.
our place in the cosmos.
It's humbling to realize that we're still grappling with some of the same questions
I know.
these philosophers were pondering centuries ago.
It shows how timeless
Yeah.
and relevant.
They are timeless.
Yeah, these ideas really are.
And I think they resonate with us
Yeah.
because they tap into something very fundamental about the human experience.
Like what?
Our desire to understand ourselves and the world around us.
Okay.
Our search for meaning and purpose.
Right?
These are timeless pursuits.
They are.
And these thinkers, with their bold questioning
Mm-hmm.
and their innovative thinking, they help to chart a course for those pursuits.
So as we close out our deep dive
Okay.
into the philosophical renaissance,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the most important takeaway is that ideas matter.
Ideas matter.
These philosophers weren't just writing abstract treatises.
Right.
They were shaping the world with their thoughts.
Wow.
Their ideas had real-world consequences,
Okay.
influencing politics, religion, science, art.
It's a reminder that our own ideas have the potential to shape the world around us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to think critically,
Okay.
to question assumptions, and to engage in these great conversations about reality, knowledge, and the human condition.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
It's been an incredible journey. exploring the origins of modern thought.
Yeah.
I always love how these deep dives give us a new perspective on the present by understanding the past.
For sure.
And I'll be thinking about these philosophers
Me too.
and their ideas long after we finish this conversation.
It's been a pleasure diving into these sources with you.
Yeah, with you and our listeners.
And remember, there's always more to learn,
Always more to explore.
more to question.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.
Yes.
And keep diving deep.